I woke up that morning expecting the same quiet routine I'd had for years. Coffee on the porch, a view of the mountains, and nothing but open land in front of me. But instead of silence, I saw something that made me stop mid-sip. A long line of tour buses stretched across my property, one after another, filling up my private road. Police lights were flashing near the gate, and the entire scene looked completely out of place. That's when I realized something had gone very wrong. At first I thought it had to be a mistake, maybe a GPS error or a driver taking a wrong turn. But as I stood there watching, more buses kept pulling in behind the others, stacking up like they were following directions. No one was turning around. No one was leaving. They were all heading straight toward one place, my locked gate. When I got a closer look, I couldn't believe it. There weren't just a handful of buses. There were dozens. Eventually I counted close to 50 full-sized tour buses, all trying to drive through a private road that clearly didn't belong to them. That road cut directly through my land, and I'd owned it for years. There were signs posted. There were records filed. There was no confusion about who it belonged to. And yet, there they were. The reason they weren't going any further was simple. At the end of that road stood my gate, a heavy-duty metal ranch gate, chained and locked exactly the way I always kept it. 2 security workers stood nearby, trying to manage the situation, but there wasn't much they could do. The buses were stuck, and there was no way around it. That's when I noticed a familiar face near the front of the line, the HOA board president, standing there with a clipboard, talking to police like he was in charge of everything. He looked confident, like this was all part of some plan. But the moment he saw me walking toward him, that confidence started to shift. It didn't take long to figure out what had happened. This wasn't an accident. The HOA had planned this. They had created some kind of scenic tour route and decided, without asking me, that it would run straight through my property. They mapped it out, sold tickets, and sent out dozens of buses full of tourists expecting a smooth ride through private land they didn't own. They had even printed materials and directions, clearly showing my road as part of the route. It was all laid out like it was completely legitimate, but they skipped one very important step. They never got permission. Back in the present, the situation was getting worse by the minute. Passengers started stepping off the buses, looking around, confused and frustrated. Some of them pulled out their phones and started recording. Others were asking questions the drivers couldn't answer. The line of buses stretched so far back it disappeared into the distance. The drivers themselves were getting agitated, walking around, making phone calls, trying to figure out why they'd been sent somewhere they couldn't access. You could hear the frustration in their voices. They had schedules to keep, customers to manage, and now they were stuck in the middle of nowhere with no clear solution. Meanwhile, I leaned against the fence, took another sip of my coffee, and we just watched it all unfold. I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. Everything was playing out exactly the way it should. Then the HOA president finally walked up to me. His tone wasn't friendly. He demanded that I open the gate, like I owed him something. Like he had the authority to tell me what to do on my own land. That's when I smiled and told him calmly, "This is private property." He didn't believe me at first. So I went inside, grabbed my documents, and handed them over to one of the officers. Property lines, ownership records, legal, access rights, everything was clearly stated. The officer looked through the paperwork carefully, then turned to the HOA president and asked him a simple question. "Did you authorize all of this?" That's when everything started to change. The confidence he had earlier disappeared. He tried to explain, tried to justify it, but it wasn't working. The facts were right there in front of everyone. He had approved a commercial route through land he didn't own, without permission. And now 50 buses were stuck because of it. As more buses arrived and the line grew longer, the situation turned into complete chaos. Tourists wandered around, taking pictures, some amused, others annoyed. Drivers argued on their phones, trying to get instructions. Police began blocking off the road behind the buses, making it clear that no one was moving until things were sorted out. The HOA president stepped away and started making calls, pacing back and forth. His tone had completely changed. There was no confidence left, only stress and urgency. He knew this wasn't going to be easy to fix, and me, I stayed right where I was, calm, quiet, and watching. Eventually, the officers began explaining the situation to the drivers: unauthorized access, private property, legal violations. It didn't take long before the drivers turned their attention to the HOA president. They wanted answers. They wanted to know who put them in this position. The pressure built quickly. Voices got louder. Frustration turned into confrontation. And just like that, the person who thought he was in charge found himself at the center of the problem. That's when I made a call on my own. I contacted my lawyer and explained everything that was happening. He listened, asked a few questions, and then let out a short laugh before saying, "I'll be there soon." While we waited, reports were being written. Officers documented everything: the buses, the blocked access, the unauthorized use of private land. The situation was being recorded from every angle, including by the tourists who were now posting videos online before long. Representatives from the bus companies started arriving and they were not happy. They had lost time, disrupted schedules, and now had customers demanding refunds. They wanted to know exactly who was responsible, and all signs pointed to one person. By that point, the HOA president looked completely overwhelmed. He wasn't giving orders anymore. He wasn't arguing. He was just trying to keep up with everything happening around him. I did allow one thing. I made sure emergency vehicles could get through if needed. I wasn't trying to cause harm. I just wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of my property. When my lawyer arrived, he took one look at the situation and immediately understood the scale of it. He spoke with the officers, reviewed the documents, and made it clear that there were serious legal issues involved. Unauthorized use, liability concerns, and multiple parties affected. Standing there, the HOA president finally seemed to understand how serious things had become. This wasn't a small misunderstanding anymore. It had turned into something much bigger, with consequences he hadn't anticipated. One by one, the buses had to start backing out, slowly, carefully, reversing miles down the road they came from. It took hours to clear everything out. Drivers were exhausted, passengers were frustrated, and the entire situation had become a public spectacle. Over the next week, things only got worse for the HOA. Emergency meetings were called. Board members argued, trying to figure out what went wrong and who was responsible. But the evidence was clear, and there was no avoiding it. Eventually, the president stepped down. The pressure, the fallout, and the attention were too much to ignore. The situation had gone far beyond what anyone expected. As for me, I went back to my usual routine, sitting on the porch, drinking my coffee, looking out over the same quiet land I'd always known. The road was empty again. No buses, no chaos, just peace. In the end, it wasn't about getting even. It was about standing your ground and knowing your rights. Because if you don't, someone else might decide they can use what's yours without asking. That gate stayed locked, just like always. And now, everyone knew why. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from.